The radio crackled at 3:12 a.m., cutting through the dead silence of the 47-story office building. I jerked my hand away from the security desk coffee mug, scalding liquid sloshing across incident reports. Emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Elevator anomaly detected at multiple downtown locations. Keep all elevators in continuous motion. Stopping equals entity breach. Repeat. Do not stop elevator movement. My fingers fumbled with the radio dials, static hissing between stations. The emergency tone kept cycling, that flat, mechanical wail that made my teeth ache. I'd worked building security for 3 years and never heard anything like it. The main elevator bank's indicator lights flickered on. Floor 1, Floor 7, Floor 23, Floor 12. The cars were moving on their own. No call buttons pressed. No passengers logged in the system. My hand moved to the master control panel, muscle memory from my old elevator tech days. The elevator shaft hummed with mechanical rhythm, cables sliding, motors whirring, steel grinding against steel. But underneath something else. A wet scraping sound, like fingernails on metal, echoing from the depths below the basement level. I grabbed my flashlight and headed to elevator bank A. The display showed car 3 moving between floors 15 and 16, then dropping to 8, then shooting up to 31. The pattern made no sense. Elevators don't hunt floors randomly. My radio squawked again. Maintain vertical motion in all elevator systems. Violation will result in containment breach. The emergency shutdown button glowed red on the control panel. Standard procedure for malfunctions: hit the kill switch, lock down the system, call maintenance. My palm hovered over it, sweat beading despite the building's night cycle air conditioning. The scraping sound grew louder. I slammed the emergency stop. Every elevator in the building lurched to a halt with a screech of brake pads. The lights flickered. The scraping stopped. Then the building shook. Not an earthquake tremor, something rising from below, slamming against the elevator shaft walls. Dust rained from the ceiling tiles. My coffee mug shattered on the marble floor. The radio fell silent except for static. Through the gap between elevator car 3's doors and the shaft wall, a section of concrete crumbled away. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating something massive moving in the space that shouldn't exist below the foundation. Flesh. Pale, wet flesh stretched across twisted metal framework. Cables and sinew fused together, pulsing with each impact against the shaft walls. The thing was climbing floor by floor, using the elevator tracks like a ladder. My hand jerked toward the override switch to restart the elevators. The radio burst back to life. Violation detected. Security personnel Mira Holt, Building 47th and Main. Containment protocols active. It knew my name. The elevator systems restarted with a grinding roar. Car 3 shot upward so fast the cables sang. Car 1 plummeted toward the basement. The creature's impact sounds followed the movement, staying just below the active cars. I ran to the shaft access door on the 2nd floor, my boots echoing in the empty corridors. The maintenance ladder was slick with condensation that hadn't been there during my evening rounds. I climbed down 3 rungs and pointed my flashlight into the darkness. The thing filled the entire lower shaft. Tentacles thick as fire hoses writhed around the elevator cables, covered in what looked like human fingernails and scraps of fabric. At the center, a mass of fused torsos and limbs, all moving with mechanical precision. It was using the elevator vibrations to navigate, following the movement like a predator tracking prey. My foot slipped on the wet ladder rung. The flashlight tumbled into the shaft, its beam spinning as it fell. For a split second, the light illuminated a face pressed against the creature's surface, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The face was wearing a security uniform badge, same company as mine. I scrambled back up the ladder, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the rungs. The radio in my belt crackled. Feeding cycle requires vertical motion. Do not interrupt elevator operation. Feeding cycle. I reached the second floor and slammed the access door, my back pressed against it as the building continued to shake. Through the corridor windows, I could see other downtown buildings. Half of them had elevators running at 3 a.m., lights moving up and down in vertical patterns, like the building was breathing. My radio buzzed with cross-chatter from other security posts. Building on 5th Street, all elevators running non-stop. Lost contact with night shift at the Meridian Tower. Something in the elevator shaft at Central Plaza, requesting immediate. Static cut the transmission. The elevator bank A indicator lights showed all 3 cars in constant motion. 12th floor, 8th floor, 25th floor, 3rd floor. The pattern was keeping the creature below occupied, following the vibrations up and down the shaft like a cat chasing a laser pointer. But elevator car 2's motion was slowing. The motor strained against something heavy. Through the building's intercom system, I heard breathing that wasn't mine. Slow, mechanical inhalation and exhalation, synchronized with the elevator movements. The creature wasn't just feeding on motion, it was learning to control it. Floor 12. Car 2 stopped completely. The emergency lights flickered red. My radio screamed static, then cut to the emergency broadcast. Passenger extraction protocol initiated. Security personnel proceed to floor 12 for containment support. Something was in the elevator. I grabbed my master keys and ran for the stairwell, my feet pounding on concrete steps. 12 floors up, my lungs burning, the taste of copper in my mouth. Behind me, the creature's scraping sounds echoed through the building's skeleton, following my movement through the walls. The 12th floor corridor was empty, but the elevator car 2 doors stood open. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the marble tiles. Fresh gouges marked the walls around the elevator entrance, like claw marks. And there were wet footprints leading away from the elevator, tracking across the floor toward the windows. Human footprints. 5 sets of them. The footprints led to the break room, where 5 people sat motionless around the conference table. Their clothes were torn, fabric hanging in strips like something had pulled at them. Their skin was gray pale, the color of concrete, and when I stepped into the room, their heads turned toward me in perfect unison. "Who are you?" The question came from all 5 mouths simultaneously, voices overlapping like an echo. I backed against the doorframe, my hand finding the radio on my belt. "I'm building security. How did you get here?" The woman closest to me, mid-30s, nurse scrubs stained dark, touched her face with trembling fingers. Blood trickled from her nose, thick and black. "Sienna Ward, I think. I was driving home from my shift." Her voice separated from the others, human again. The man in the business suit across from her doubled over, retching. Nothing came up but dark fluid that steamed when it hit the table. "Asher Klein," he gasped between heaves. "I remember getting in an elevator at my office building. Different building. Wasn't this one?" My radio crackled. Passenger extraction complete. 5 subjects retrieved from feeding apparatus. Physiological integration at 67%. The maintenance worker, coveralls soaked with sweat and something that wasn't sweat, stood up too fast. His legs buckled, and he grabbed the table edge. Nolan Gray. The elevator kept moving. Hours. Days maybe. His fingernails were gone, just raw, bleeding nail beds. I tried to press the buttons, but my hands went through them. The college kid in the corner started convulsing. His back arched, bones popping audibly as his spine curved in ways spines shouldn't bend. "Cyrus Lane," he managed through gritted teeth. "It was feeding on us while we rode." taking pieces. The delivery driver, uniform torn, patches of skin missing from her arms like something had been sampling her, pressed both palms against her temples. Jolie done. The walls were breathing. Blood vessels burst in her eyes as she spoke, turning the whites crimson. I stepped closer, my flashlight beam sweeping across them. Their shadows on the wall didn't match their positions. Sienna sat in a chair, but her shadow stood upright. Asher's shadow had too many arms. "We need to get you to a hospital." I reached for my phone. "No." Cyrus lunged forward, his joints bending wrong, like someone had reassembled him incorrectly. "Don't call anyone. It spreads through signals, through vibrations. That's how it finds new feeding grounds." The building shook again. Elevator car 1 was moving below us, and the creature was following. The fluorescent lights flickered in rhythm with the elevator's motion up, down, up, down. Nolan's hands left bloody prints on the table as he tried to stand. "It's still connected to us. Part of it. I can feel it climbing." He pointed downward with fingers that bent backwards. 32nd floor. 35th. "It's coming up." Sienna's nose bled faster. The dark fluid pooled on the table, then started moving on its own, flowing toward the elevator shaft wall. "The motion keeps it stable, keeps us stable. If the elevators stop, we dissolve," Asher finished. He pulled up his shirt sleeve, revealing skin that faded to translucent at the edges. Underneath, his muscle fibers were partially visible, connected by thin strands that pulsed with the building's vibrations. My radio, subjects experiencing dimensional rejection. Recommend immediate reintegration with feeding apparatus. Reintegration? I grabbed Sienna's shoulder. Her skin was cold, but more than cold, it felt absent, like touching fog. "What does that mean?" Jolie stood up, her movements jerky like a marionette. "It means we go back in the elevator. We keep riding. Forever." Her missing skin patches were growing larger. "Or we fade completely." The building's emergency lighting switched to red. Through the break room windows, I could see the elevator shaft's indicator lights moving faster. All 3 cars running simultaneously, creating a pattern that made the creature's impacts sound like a heartbeat. Cyrus collapsed, his bones visible through translucent skin. "It's on floor 42 now, coming for us." He reached toward me with a hand that was more skeleton than flesh. "We can't stop it." The building shuddered as something massive struck the 43rd floor. Concrete dust rained from the ceiling. The elevator indicator lights showed all 3 cars converging on our location, floor 46. "The elevator's the only way out," Nolan said, his voice fading as his body became more transparent. "But once we're inside, we become part of the feeding cycle," Sienna finished. Dark blood dripped from her nose onto the floor, where it immediately began crawling toward the elevator shaft like a living thing. Through the break room floor, we could hear the creature's breathing wet, rhythmic sounds that made the entire building pulse like a heartbeat. It was directly beneath us now, and the floor was starting to crack under the pressure. My radio crackled with a final update. "Entity approaching occupied floors. Passenger reintegration required for containment. Elevator car 2 standing by." The floor gave way. We fell through splintering concrete and twisted rebar into the shaft below, landing hard on the roof of elevator car 2. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but somehow all 5 passengers landed on their feet, their bodies moving with unnatural coordination. "We're back," Cyrus whispered, and for the first time since I'd found them, he seemed solid again. "We're back in its territory." The elevator doors opened below us. The car interior was scarred with claw marks, and the floor was wet with the same dark fluid bleeding from the passengers' bodies. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red. "Get inside," I told them, but they were already moving, drawn by something I couldn't see. As soon as they stepped through the doors, their forms solidified completely. I followed them in just as something wet and massive filled the shaft above us. Tentacles thick as telephone poles crashed down where we'd been standing moments before. The elevator doors closed automatically. The car began to move. And in the darkness between floors, I heard the creature's feeding apparatus activate. Mechanical sounds mixed with organic ones, cables and tendons working together to keep us moving, keep us alive, keep us available. The radio on my belt crackled one last time. Feeding cycle initiated. Subjects secured. Integration commencing. Outside the elevator, the creature began to sing. The elevator doors slammed shut as tentacles thick as my waist burst through the shaft wall. The car jerked upward, cables screaming under pressure that shouldn't exist. Cyrus pressed himself against the back corner, his body still translucent at the edges, bones visible through fading skin. "We're moving too slow," he gasped, blood frothing at his lips. His ribcage expanded and contracted irregularly, like his lungs weren't sure how to work anymore. The creature's appendages wrapped around the elevator car from outside. Metal groaned as claws punctured through the walls. A barbed tendril snaked through the gap between the doors, searching blindly. It brushed against Cyrus's leg and his scream shattered every light bulb in the car. "Get away from the walls!" I shoved everyone toward the center. Sienna stumbled, her legs giving out. Where the creature had touched Cyrus, his flesh was dissolving, muscle and bone separating like wet tissue paper. The elevator lurched to a stop between floors 15 and 16. Emergency power failed. In the darkness, the creature's breathing echoed through the shaft wet, rasping sounds that made the entire building vibrate. My radio crackled, feeding cycle initiated. Entity engaging with designated subjects. Maintain current position. No! I hammered the emergency button. Nothing. The control panel was dead, circuits fried by whatever was wrapped around us outside. A claw punched through the floor near Jolie's feet. She jumped back, but not fast enough. The talon caught her ankle, and she screamed as it dragged her downward. Her fingers scraped against the metal floor, leaving bloody trails as she fought against the pull. Nolan grabbed her arms, his torn fingernails digging into her wrists. "I've got you." But Jolie's body was stretching impossibly, her torso extending like taffy as the creature pulled from below and Nolan pulled from above. Her spine cracked audibly, vertebrae separating with wet popping sounds. "Let her go." Asher kicked at the claw, his dress shoe connecting with chitinous shell. The impact sent shockwaves up his leg, shattering his femur. Bone fragments tore through his pants fabric as he collapsed. Cyrus was dissolving faster now, his outline wavering like heat shimmer. "It's feeding on our movement," he wheezed. "Our potential energy. Every time we struggle, it gets stronger." The elevator car tilted as more tentacles wrapped around it. Through the gaps in the doors, I could see into the creature's main body, a writhing mass of flesh and corroded metal that filled the entire shaft. Human bones jutted from its surface like decorations, and faces pressed against its translucent skin from the inside, mouths opening and closing in silent screams. Jolie's stretching reached its limit. Her body snapped back like a rubber band, slamming her into the ceiling with enough force to crack her skull. Blood sprayed across the car walls as she dropped, but the creature's claw was still embedded in her ankle. It began pulling again. The emergency brake. I fumbled in the darkness for the manual release. "If I can get us moving." A tendril shot through the side wall, wrapping around my throat. The pressure was immediate, crushing. My vision went white as it lifted me off the ground. My feet kicked uselessly against the air. Nolan threw himself at the tendril, grabbing it with both hands. His palms sizzled as acid from the creature's skin ate through his flesh, exposing the bones underneath. But he held on, pulling with strength that shouldn't have been possible from someone fading between dimensions. The pressure on my throat lessened. I dropped to the floor, gasping, and found the brake release lever. I yanked it with everything I had left. The elevator plummeted. Free fall. My stomach lurched into my throat as we dropped past floor after floor. The creature's screech filled the shaft, a sound like metal tearing and children crying. Its tentacles whipped frantically, trying to catch the falling car. Sienna was pressed against the ceiling by the acceleration, dark blood streaming from her mouth and nose. Asher's broken leg twisted at impossible angles. Jolie hung suspended in midair, still connected to the creature's claw, her body bent in ways that would have killed anyone fully human. Floor 10. Floor 5. Ground level. We kept falling. The shaft extended deep underground, far below the building's foundation. The walls changed from concrete to raw earth, then to something that wasn't earth at all, a black, pulsing substance that seemed to breathe. Floor -5, -10, -15. This isn't possible, Nolan croaked, his voice barely audible over the wind rushing past us. His dissolving hands left smears on the elevator walls as he tried to brace himself. -20, -25, -30. The creature's main body was everywhere now, surrounding us completely. We were falling through its digestive system, past chambers filled with partially dissolved humans, past pools of acid that bubbled and steamed. The elevator car was being digested too, metal walls softening and warping. At -35, we hit something solid. The impact should have killed us all instantly. Instead, the organic material cushioned our landing with a wet, sickening squelch. The elevator car crumpled like paper, but we were still alive. Barely. Cyrus was almost completely transparent now, just a ghostly outline. "We're in its stomach," he whispered. "This is where it processes us, breaks us down for feeding." The walls around us pulsed rhythmically. Digestive acids dripped from the ceiling, eating through what remained of the elevator. Where the acid touched my skin, it burned like fire. Jolie's ankle was still trapped in the creature's claw, but now I could see the full appendage. It wasn't just holding her, it was growing into her, metal and flesh fusing together. She was becoming part of the feeding apparatus. "The override," I gasped, spotting the emergency motor control box hanging loose from the shaft wall. "If I can reverse the motor, send us back up." I crawled through the acid and dissolving metal, my security uniform disintegrating as the creature's digestive juices ate through the fabric. My hands blistered as I reached for the control box, but I managed to flip the switch. The elevator motor roared to life far above us. Cable fragments dropped like deadly rain, but then I felt it upward movement. The creature's stomach convulsed as we began rising against its will. Sienna grabbed my arm with fingers that were more bone than flesh. "It's working," she said, and for the first time since I'd found them, she smiled. But Jolie couldn't come with us. The creature's claw had grown too far into her body. As the elevator car rose, she stayed behind, connected to the feeding apparatus by tendrils of fused metal and flesh. "Tell them," she called out as we ascended, her voice already fading. "Tell them about the building, about what's down here." We shot upward through the creature's body like a bullet, past the digestive chambers, past the storage areas filled with previous victims. The thing screamed again, a sound that cracked the shaft walls and brought chunks of the building down around us. At ground level, the doors burst open automatically. Emergency sunlight flooded in. I hadn't realized dawn was breaking. We crawled out onto the lobby floor, what was left of us. 3.5 people instead of 6. Cyrus was barely visible now, just a shimmer in the air. "I can feel her," he said, his voice like wind through leaves. "She's still alive down there, still feeding it, keeping it stable." The building shuddered as the creature settled back into dormancy. The elevator doors closed behind us with a gentle ding, and the car began its journey back down to resume the feeding cycle. My radio crackled one last time. Feeding cycle complete. One subject integrated successfully. System stable. Await next delivery. I looked at the 3 survivors, Sienna with her bleeding nose, Nolan with his acid-burned hands, Asher dragging his shattered leg, and Cyrus fading like a ghost. "We need to get you to a hospital," I said. Sienna shook her head. "We can't leave. Not completely. We're still connected to it. If we go too far from the building." She didn't need to finish. I could see it already. They were tethered to this place, to the creature below, part of its ecosystem now. The elevator began moving again, down to collect Jolie, up to wait for the next group of passengers. The feeding cycle continued. The building's power grid failed at 4:47 a.m. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in hellish red. The elevator jerked to a halt between floors 8 and 9, and I heard the creature roar from somewhere far below us, a sound like grinding metal and snapping bones. "Emergency power won't last long," I said, checking my watch. The backup batteries would give us maybe 20 minutes before we started free-falling into that thing's feeding chamber. Nolan pressed his acid-burned hands against the control panel. His palms left bloody smears on the buttons, but nothing responded. "It's completely dead. No power to the motor." Sienna slumped against the back wall, dark blood streaming from both nostrils now. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, ribs expanding and contracting unevenly. I can feel it pulling us down, like gravity, but stronger. The elevator car groaned as something massive shifted in the shaft below. Through the gap between the doors, I could see movement, writhing shadows, and the gleam of wet flesh pressing against the walls. Asher limped to the emergency hatch in the ceiling, his shattered leg dragging behind him. We climb out, get to the stairs. "Those stairs don't exist above floor 20, I said, "and below floor 5 they lead directly into its feeding chambers. I've seen the blueprints." The car shuddered and dropped 6 inches. The cables were stretching, metal strands popping one by one under pressure that defied physics. Whatever was down there was pulling us toward itself, using the elevator shaft like a straw. Cyrus flickered in and out of visibility, his outline wavering. "It's not just hungry, it's angry. We disrupted the feeding cycle when we escaped the first time." Another drop, 12 inches this time. The emergency lights dimmed as the batteries strained to power systems that were never meant to work while falling. My stomach lurched as we began descending at a steady rate, picking up speed. Floor 7, floor 6, floor 5. "The manual brake," I said, pointing to a red lever behind the control panel. "It'll lock the car in place, but someone has to keep holding it down." Nolan grabbed the lever with his ruined hands and pulled. His burned palms split open against the metal, but the elevator stopped its descent. Blood dripped from his fingers onto the floor. "I can't hold this forever," he gasped. His arms shook with the effort, tendons standing out like cables under his skin. Floor 4. We were still dropping, just slower now. The manual brake was fighting against something with the strength of a hydraulic press. Through the floor, I could hear scraping sounds, claws on metal, getting closer. The creature was climbing up to meet us, tired of waiting for its meal to arrive. Sienna's nose started bleeding harder, dark blood spattering her hospital scrubs. My head feels like it's going to explode. The pressure down there. A claw punched through the floor near my feet, black and serrated like a saw blade. I jumped back as it swept through the space where I'd been standing, leaving gouges in the metal. The creature's arm was as thick as a tree trunk, covered in scales that dripped with digestive acid. Asher swung his broken leg at the appendage, using his fractured femur like a club. The impact sent shockwaves through his body, but the creature's arm recoiled with a wet, sucking sound. It's testing us, I realized, seeing how much fight we have left. The elevator dropped to floor 3, then 2. Nolan's grip on the brake lever was slipping, his blood making everything slick. His knuckles had turned white from strain, then purple from lack of circulation. "I'm losing it," he said through gritted teeth. "Another 30 seconds and we're gone." More claws burst through the walls, dozens of them, all different sizes and shapes. Some were metallic, fused with pieces of previous elevators. Others were purely organic, dripping with fluids that ate through the car's interior like lie-through fabric. Sienna screamed as a barbed tentacle wrapped around her waist. It lifted her off the ground and slammed her against the ceiling. Her spine cracked audibly, vertebrae separating with sounds like breaking kindling. The creature was inside the car now, filling it with writhing flesh and metal. Its main body pressed against the exterior walls, and I could see faces embedded in its surface, previous victims, their mouths opening and closing in silent agony. Jolie was in there somewhere, still alive, still feeding it. Floor 1, ground level. We kept falling. The shaft opened into something impossible, a vast cavern that extended far beyond the building's foundation. The walls were lined with organic material that pulsed like a heartbeat, and the air reeked of ammonia and decay. Nolan's hands finally gave out. He collapsed as the brake lever snapped back into position, and we plummeted into the feeding chamber. The impact should have killed us. Instead, we hit a cushioned surface that absorbed the crash like a giant stomach. The elevator car crumpled, metal folding inward, but the organic material beneath us rippled and flexed to keep us relatively intact. We were in the creature's digestive system. The walls around us were lined with half-dissolved humans in various stages of processing. Some still moved, their limbs twitching as the digestive acids broke down their nervous systems. Others had been reduced to skeletal remains held together by corroded metal implants. Acid dripped from stalactites overhead, each drop burning through our clothes and skin. Where it touched my security uniform, the fabric dissolved instantly, leaving chemical burns that went down to the bone. Cyrus was completely transparent now, just a ghost outline. This is where it stores us while we break down. Could be days, could be weeks. Asher tried to stand, but his broken leg folded under him. The bone fragments had torn through muscle and skin, leaving his thigh looking like ground meat. There has to be a way out. I spotted it then, an emergency motor control box mounted on the cavern wall, partially dissolved but still functional. If I could reach it, reverse the motor direction, maybe we could ride the cables back up. But it meant crawling through pools of digestive acid that were already eating through the elevator floor. "I can make it," I said, stripping off what remained of my uniform. The acid burned like fire against my bare skin, but cloth would only make it worse. I dove into the nearest pool, holding my breath as the creature's digestive juices engulfed me. My skin bubbled and peeled away in sheets, exposing raw muscle underneath. My eyes watered uncontrollably, tears mixing with acid until I couldn't see anything but burning light. The control box was 20 feet away. 15, 10. Behind me, Sienna was screaming as tentacles erupted from the cavern floor and wrapped around her legs. They pulled her downward, toward a deeper chamber where the half-digested remains went to be processed further. 5 feet from the box, my hands were dissolving, fingertips gone, bones showing through the remaining flesh. But I could still move my fingers, still grip the control switch. I flipped it. The elevator motor roared to life far above us, cables snapping taut. What remained of our car jerked upward, dragging pieces of the creature's digestive system with it. But Sienna was gone, pulled down into the deeper chambers. And Nolan had stopped moving, his body finally succumbing to the acid burns and blood loss. Asher grabbed my dissolving arm and hauled me back into the rising elevator car. Cyrus flickered beside us, barely there but somehow still present. We shot upward through the creature's body like a bullet, past chambers filled with processing equipment made of fused bone and metal. The thing screamed around us, its voice shaking chunks of concrete loose from the shaft walls. At ground level, the doors burst open and we tumbled onto the lobby floor. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows. When had it gotten so bright outside? 2.5 people left out of 6. I looked at my hands. The bones were visible through strips of hanging flesh, but somehow they still worked. Asher's leg was bent at angles that shouldn't be possible, white bone jutting through his pants. Cyrus was just a shimmer in the air, fading more with each second. The elevator doors closed behind us with that same gentle ding, and the car began its journey back down to resume the feeding cycle. My radio, somehow still functional despite everything, crackled one last time. Feeding cycle adjusted. 2 subjects successfully integrated. System adapting. Next delivery scheduled. I crawled to the building's front entrance, leaving a trail of blood and dissolved flesh on the marble floor. Behind us, the elevator continued its endless journey up and down, carrying pieces of Sienna and Nolan back to the creature below. They were part of the feeding system now, part of the building itself. The morning air hit my exposed nerves like ice water, but I managed to pull out my phone and post to the Urban Exploration Forum before I passed out. Building at 47th and Main condemned effective immediately. Elevator shaft compromised. Structural instability confirmed. 4 people still missing: Sienna Ward, Nolan Gray, Jolie Dunn, Cyrus Lane. Do not enter. Do not use elevators. Feeding system still active. The paramedics found me an hour later. They said I'd lost 60% of my skin to chemical burns and somehow survived. Asher was in worse shape. They had to amputate his leg, but he lived. Cyrus just faded, disappeared completely somewhere between the hospital parking lot and the emergency room. But I know he's still there in the building. They all are. When I drive past 47th and Main at night, I can see the elevator moving behind the darkened windows. Up and down, carrying its passengers to their feeding appointments. The building was supposed to be demolished last month, but the construction crews keep finding problems. Equipment failures, workers getting sick, strange sounds coming from the elevator shaft. The city gave up trying, put up some barriers and left it alone. But the elevator keeps moving. The feeding cycle continues. And sometimes, late at night, I get text messages from numbers I don't recognize. The elevator is waiting. Come back. Complete the cycle. I never respond, but I know that someday I'll have to go back. The creature is patient, but it doesn't forget. And it's still hungry.